It's Tezayin on the base 2. 16b2. Okay. As you know, we have a halacha called lavud. Lavud means it's a special halacha l'Moshe Sinai. As you know, the Torah was given with a explanation, and then there were certain things that were independent halachot, and part of independent halachot and certain explanation regarding what makes something kosher for a sukkah. Certain laws about sukkah, certain laws about general walls that are nothing to do with sukkah, other situations of what defines a wall, or how do you deal with spaces in between, and that's called lavud. Lavud is that when we have a gap, a space less than 3 tvachim, we look at that space as if that space is filled, as if that gap is closed. So now today we're going to discuss having a mat, and the mat does not come up 10 tvachim. As we know, the height of a sukkah, there's a minimum height for a sukkah to be kosher. The minimum height has to be 10 tvachim. 10 tvachim is about, let's say, if we'll be strict, we'll take the 4 inches. Between 3 and 4 inches are 40 inches. If you have a height of 40 inches, you definitely have met the requirement of the height of a sukkah. That's the height of a sukkah, and we said the height of 10 tvachim, and the width, it has to be 7, and the inside has to be 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. So you have a height of 10 tvachim, 40 inches, and then let's say 28 inches by 28 inches is the inside of the sukkah. Now we're going to discuss, you have an item that's not 10 tvachim, in itself it's not 10 tvachim high, but we're going to see how you can even have something that's a little over 4 tvachim high. It's less than half the height of a wall, and it can be used as a wall, and it can be a kosher wall. How can you do that? You just told me that a wall has to be 10 tvachim. And now you're telling me I have a situation that you could get away with doing a wall a little more than 4 tvachim. How is that possible? So when we use this halachic principle called lavud, that when you have a gap less than 3 tvachim, it's as if the gap is closed, as if the gap is closed. So if you would have, for instance, let's say you have a sukkah that's 10 tvachim high, okay? 10 tvachim high sukkah. And then you made a wall, and the wall goes up a little more than 7 tvachim, goes up a little more than, let's say 10 tvachim is here, and 7 tvachim here, but it's a little more than 7 tvachim, and the gap between the schach and the tighter wall is less than 3 tvachim. So what do we look at? We look at it as that gap is closed, as if there's a 10 tvachim wall. Similarly, if we have a wall that starts near the schach and goes down to the bottom, but doesn't reach the ground, it comes within 3 tvachim of the ground. It comes up, the wall ends over here, right? If the wall ends over here, it's above the ground, but as long as the gap between the end of the wall and the ground is less than 3 tvachim, we look at it as if the wall has reached the ground. Is that clear, Mr. Haber? So therefore, now comes the Gemara and says, if you go ahead and you have this wall that's a little more than 4 tvachim, and I place it with a little bit within 3 tvachim of the schach and within 3 tvachim of the ground. So I place this wall right in the middle, okay, pretty much in the middle. To have, let's say, a 4 tefach wall in the middle, but it's not 4. It's a little more than 4. Let's say it's 4.5 tefach, 4.25 tefach wall. And the 4.25 tefach wall, 4.25 tefach wall. From the ground, I make sure at 2 7/8. At 2 7/8 begins my wall. 2 7/8 plus 4.25. What do we got? Okay, 2 7/8 plus 4 1/4, right? So I'll have over 7, right? So I have 7 tvachim right over here, and or 4 1/4. So that means 2 7/8 and 4 1/4. Or if we call, let's say 2 3/4 and 4 1/4. 2 3/4 wall, again, off the ground. It comes within 2 3/4 off the ground. And then I have enough. Now, so count 2 3/4 plus 4 1/4. Yeah, but that's But I want to get. Let's say the wall is. Let's say the wall is 2 7/8. Let's say I got the wall went within the ground 2 7/8 from the ground. Okay, so now then the wall went 4 1/4. So now 4 1/4, 2 7/8 makes it 7 1/8. Is that correct? Now it's at 7 1/8, but 7 1/8 is within 3 tvachim of 10. So therefore, now we look at it as if the space on the top is closed, and from 7 1/8 to the ceiling is closed, and from 2 7/8 to the bottom is closed. So therefore, we have actually halachic wall of 10 tvachim. Even though the actual wall itself is 4 1/4, it's only a 4 1/4. The size of the width of the wall is 4 1/4. So if you look at the picture that you have in the art scroll, you look at the picture number 20, right? Mr. Hagen, you see the picture? You see that wall that's going across. You see this empty space between the middle of the wall and the ceiling, and there's empty space between the bottom and the floor. But the space between the bottom of that wall and the floor is less than 3 tvachim. I gave you an example of 2 7/8. And the space between the top of that wall and the ceiling is also less than 3 tvachim. So halachically, we look at that as if it's filled up, and that will be a kosher wall. So if the whole sukkah is made with these type of walls, then it's kosher. That's an amazing concept that you could have all these spaces between. It's the space on top of the wall, space on the bottom of the wall, but since the thing itself is more than 4 tvachim, and therefore it's only filling gaps of less than 3 tvachim, it works. So that's the Gemara. Amar Avimi, comes Avimi, and Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Avimi, Marcelet Arba or Mashu Materet V'Sukkah Mishum Dofen. This Marcelet, that's a little bit. It's wider than 4 tvachim. That will go ahead and permit this sukkah to be a kosher sukkah. Heichi Avid, how does he construct this sukkah that it should be kosher? So the Gemara says, Tali le be'emsa. He hangs this in the air. He puts this little over 4. I called it a 4 1/4 wall. He puts it in the middle. Pachot mishlosha lamata, within 3 tvachim of the ground. Pachot mishlosha lamayla, and within 3 tvachim above. And kol pachot mishlosha. Good morning, Simon. Anything that's less than 3 tvachim, kalavadami, is considered as if that gap is filled. Is filled. So the Gemara says pshita. This is obvious. We don't need a rabbi to tell us something that's obvious. Nobody has to tell us that 101 is 2. No one has to tell us that you have to say a Borei Pri Eitz on an apple. It's obvious to say Borei Pri Eitz on an apple, let's say. So what do you have to tell me this halacha that if you have these gaps, if the gap is less than 3 tvachim, it's as if it's closed? That's a general halacha that we have all over Shas of called lavud. We have this principle that you have gaps. We had this case. If you have a wall, we spoke about if you have a wall, you have sticks. You make iron wall sticks standing. As long as even if there's spaces between the sticks, as long as the spaces are less than 3 tvachim, you can have this. Will be considered a wall. This will be considered a wall. You have spaces less than 3 tvachim. Even it's called that's another application of lavud. We had other cases of lavud. So what do you need to tell me What's the need to tell me this case, this situation? You're just telling me the law of lavud, which is something that we already know. Is that clear what the Gemara's question is? You don't need to tell me something, Max, is that clear? You don't need to tell me something that we already know. So the Gemara says he's telling us something that we did not know. What is he telling us? The concept of lavud, that when you have an empty space, you could say it joins as if it's closed. Maybe that concept is, you could say, a one-time shot. You could say lavud, that you could consider a wall extended once, but to apply the concept in the same case that we're going to say lavud, that it fills a gap, not only it fills the gap on the top, it fills the gap on the bottom, or not only on the bottom or on the top. You might have thought that maybe this is the halachic allowance that we say when there's a gap, it's considered filled. Maybe we will only you get one pass on the deal. You get one gap that we're going to consider closed. That we're going to consider taking a look at this structure, which is such a small structure of wall. The wall itself is only 4 1/4 wide, and you're going to tell me you're going to use lovin on both ends, both on the top and both on the bottom, to consider that it's closed on both areas. That's a novelty. That is something that we did not know before. We might have just said, maybe we could extend it this way, or we'll extend it that way. That in the same situation, we're going to extend the wall both ways, as if it's closed on both sides. That's the novelty. Ma'odutema, you might have thought chad lavud amina. We say that you could extend the wall one time in one case. Avol lavud lo amina, but to say 2 lavuds in the same case, we will not say. So therefore, kamash malan, there comes the chidush that we will say trei lavuds. We will still say 2 lavuds. We'll still say lavud on both ends. Now, some of the Tosfos points out, if you look at the Tosfos Mount, the Tema Chad Lavud Amrina, Trei Lavud Lo Amrina, and the Tema, Tosfos says we already told us that you had the lavud applies if you have the sticks. Certain cases that we had lavud, that we did apply the lavud, in both cases, in 2 situations in the same situation. Right, like we said, Tosfos says that this situation is very unique. This situation where you're actually creating the lavud going this way, going up and going down. To say that you'll look at these 2 sticks as that sticks like this that are connected, that might be easier to say than to say that when to create the spaces this way, that it goes this way, that we're going to go lavud also up and down in such a fashion. That Tosfos says is a chiddush that we never had before. Even if we have some other types of lavud that we might say we go both ways. If you go back in the Gemara earlier on Zayin Amud Aleph, let's take a look at that case of. We know the case of. Right, the vertical poles, right. We know the vertical poles. So that's the standing up poles that we said you say love, even though you're saying love it constantly throughout the time. You're saying love it pole 1, pole 2. There's a space between pole 1 and pole 2, pole 3 and pole 4. So we look at that, that's closed. So that, you might say, maybe that's where we consider something closed in that fashion. But to say that this gap, such a gap going up and such a gap going down, is considered that we're looking at this as a wall. You see, you could understand when you see a wall, right? You have a wall in front of you. You see it's 10 tefachim, except there's some spaces in between the sticks. You could see why that's, even though there's 100 sticks and you're going to say love it 100 times, but you could say, I can understand that that type of space is so insignificant to be considered a problem in this wall. But over here, to actually look at this structure, which is just a 4.5, 4.25 wall, and to say it goes up and it goes down, such that it goes vertically, as you would say, right? To say that it's going to go vertically, lavud, both cases, that's the chidush. So that we're going to look at that as a wall. You have a vertical wall. That's a chidush. Okay, meitive. So the Gemara challenges this statement, meaning it's not so simple to the Gemara that you say lavud twice in the same situation vertically, that you're going to consider this wall as if it goes up and it goes down, and it's considered a 10 tefach wall. Meitive. I'll ask you the following question. Machselet shiva umashu materet b'sukkah mishum dofen. If you have this mat, and the mat is a little over 7 tvachim, let's say 7 tvachim and an eighth, it permits that will allow you, that will be considered a good, now you have a good wall. That allows you to go ahead and count that as one of your walls for your sukkah. Now, the fact that you give me that the Breita is very specific about its case. Good morning, Ralph.
Morning, Rabbi.
Morning. We are on Tezayin Amud Beis 16b 2. The fact that the Breita was very specific and gave me a case of a mat that's a little over 7 tvachim, and that will work for a sukkah, right? If you have a mat a little over 7 tvachim, so the Gemara is thinking, if you're talking about a 10 tefach high sukkah, why should the Breita give us a small chidush? If it's true that you say lavud, that you say when you have a gap, you could say the gap is filled on both ends, as long as the gap, the space is less than 3 tvachim. So why doesn't the Breita tell me the greater chidush, the greater novelty, that you have a wall, you have a mat that's a little over 4 tvachim? If it's true that you say lavud both on the top and both on the bottom in the same situation, so what comes out? You have a novelty that you can have a wall that's wide a little over 4 tvachim, but as long as you place it in the middle, that it's a less than 3 to the top, to the schach, and less than 3 to the bottom, you got a 10 tefach wall, Ralph. We spoke about if you have a wall that's 4.25 tvachim wide, 4.25, and then let's say it's within 4.25, and you place it at 2 7/8, with a gap of 2 7/8 from the bottom of the 4.25 wall. So you have 2 7/8 underneath, plus your 4.25 wall, which will make it 7, right? Then you're a little over 7 tefachim high at that point, and since you're within 3 tefach of the ceiling, you have a 10 tefach wall. So why does the Breita talk about a case of a 7 tefach wall, a little over 7 tefach wall, which would give you only one gap if it's a little over 7 tefach wall? Why doesn't the Breita talk about a case when the wall is a little over 4 tefach, and you have 2 gaps, and then you will be applying the principle of lavud twice in the same situation? So the Gemara is suggesting, by the fact that the Breita talks about the case, Simon, that it's only one gap. You're only going to be filling one gap with a wall a little over 7 tvachim, because a wall over 7 tvachim, you only need to reach 10 tvachim. You don't have to fill 2 gaps. When the wall is a little over 4 tefach wall, you got to put in the middle to get 2 gaps, to fill in 2 gaps. But here you only have to fill in 1 gap. So and the fact that the Breita only tells you you're filling 1 gap would seem to indicate that we do not say lavud twice in the same situation. So the Gemara says no proof. Really, maybe you would say lavud twice. Kitanyahi b'sukkah gedola. That's talking about a sukkah that's not a 10 tefach exact height sukkah. We're talking about a sukkah that's, let's say it's a 15 tefach high sukkah, a 25 tefach high sukkah. So in that case, you can't, if you put a 4.5, 4.25 wall in the middle, you're gonna have from the 4.25 wall till you reach the schach, you're gonna have more than 3 tvachim, because we're talking about the height of the sukkah is 50 tefach high sukkah, whatever, 15 tefach high sukkah. So from a 4.25 wall to the top is more than 3 tvachim. So it would not be able to. So therefore, you wouldn't be able to fill the gap in such a case if it would be if you put a little over 4.25 tefach wall in such a circumstance, because you are too far from the schach to connect to the schach. So therefore, we have to be talking about a wall that's a little over 7 tefach wall. And what gap are we filling? So I have a wall a little over 7 tefach wall, and let's say I left that 7 tefach wall, I left the space of 2 7/8 or 2 3/4 from that wall to the schach. I left that space from the wall to the schach. So now we're going to say lavut. Let's say the sukkah is a 15 tefach high sukkah. Right? I have a 15 tefach high sukkah. I went ahead and I placed the wall. I went down as I created a gap from the schach, a 2 7/8 gap. And then I placed a little over 7.25 wall. So if I have a 7.25 wall with a little over 2 7/8 gap to the schach, that will fill. Now I have a 10 tefach wall. Now, the bottom of the wall. Good morning, Dr. Navid. The Gemara says good morning. So now the obvious question here is also that what is the chidush? What is the novelty in such a case if you and what is it coming to teach us? What is the novelty in this case? The Gemara says, let's see. See, if you look at your picture, on 22, just to bring Dr. Navid up to date, we're talking about having gaps in your wall. If you have a certain width of a wall, from the top of your wall to the schach, if you have less than 3 tefachim gap, it's kosher. We look at it as if it's filled, as if it's completed, the wall extended, as long as you have a gap less than 3 tefachim. Similarly, if the gap from the bottom of the wall to the floor is less than 3 tefachim, we look at it as if it's filled. And the Gemara says that we look at it both. You can have a wall a little over 4 tefachim, as long as the gap from the top of the wall to the schach is less than 3 tefachim, and the bottom wall to the ground is less than 3 tefachim, we say it's filled up. The Gemara now says that the case of 7, a little over 7, is a sukkah gedolah. It's a very large sukkah, and a very large sukkah, you would not have the ability to do two. There's no ability to do two lavuts, because a very large sukkah, if the schach is 15 tefachim off the ground, so where are you putting this? If you would put a little over 4 tefach wall in the middle, it would be more space. Let's say if you put a little over 4 tefach wall from the ground, you do 2 7/8, and you put a 4.25 wall right on top of that. So now it's a little over 7, but the gap from the top of the wall to the schach is more than 3 tefachim. Because it's a 15 tefach high wall. So therefore, you would not be able to say lavud in such a case. So therefore, that's why the Braita talks about the case that the wall itself. Good morning. The wall itself is a little over 7 tefach wall, and you created a space from the top of the wall to the schach of less than 3 tvachim. Therefore, we look at the wall as if it extended. I have a wall a little over 7, a 7.25 wall, and I got a space of 2 and something space. Let's say I have a 2 and 3/4 space, and I got a 7.25 wall. I'm good. I got a 10 tefach wall. So what's the chidush? The chidush is, the Gemara says, I mean, if it's a regular case of a 10, what's the chidush? The chidush is that even though the bottom of the wall is higher than the ground more than 3 tvachim, and we had a machloket in the Gemara in the Mishnah earlier, if the bottom of the wall is higher than the ground 3 tvachim that a goat could walk right through, is that considered a wall or not? Is this considered a wall? I placed a wall, Simon. I placed a wall. The wall. I cut the bottom of a wall. I have 3 tvachim, 4 tvachim empty on the bottom. On the bottom, there's a space. If you look at the picture on 22 in the art scroll, you see the picture on 22, Simon, on page 16b2. On 22, that bottom space, a goat could walk right through that bottom space. I got a lot of space on the bottom. See that, Max? I got a lot of space on the bottom. But on the top, I don't have so much space. I left less than 3 tvachim. I got that wall in the middle, a little over 7 tefach wall in the middle. I got less than 3 tefach from the 7.25 to the top. It's less than 3 tvachim. So I got, therefore, that's considered as if that's a 10 tefach wall. But what if, Rabbi, but the bottom of the wall, the goat could walk right through. But the chidush is that even if the goat could walk right through, even though there's a hole in the bottom, this opinion says it's fine. It's no problem. We say that you could have an a wall that's hanging wall. A hanging wall is a wall. That's the question, Mr. Abel, we spoke about yesterday. So you have a mechitzat tliyah. You have a wall that's suspended in air. Is that a wall? But it's not a wall. Does the wall have to come down to the bottom of the ground or not? So this opinion holds that a wall does not have to go all the way down to the bottom. This opinion holds that a wall could be suspended. If you have a 10 tefach wall, it's a wall. We look at it, we look at that wall as if it's extended, as if it goes all the way down to the bottom, even though it's not within 3 tvachim of the ground, even though the rule of the lover doesn't apply, you consider that a wall. So that's what the Gemara says over here. The Gemara says, "Amai kamash malan." What is a chidush? What is a novelty? The mishal shilin defanot l'mayla lamata Reb Yossi. That we could go ahead and we consider a wall that could go from above to down, even though there's a space of more than 3 tvachim. Is a wall suspended in midair is considered a wall. Okay. Amar Rav Ami. Rav Ami says the following: Pas arbo mashu. If you have a pas is a board, and the board is a little over 4 tvachim. And that board, if you look at the picture, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So turn the page of 16b3. 16b3, you see the picture on the right corner. There's the 3 walls. Now, you see that wall, there's a space between the wall that's facing you, that hits you first, that's facing you, looking straight ahead. That there's a space between that wall and the next wall, and the adjacent wall. Correct, Simon? So as long as that's, you see that, Mr. Haber, on 16b3, right? So that the wall did not go all the way to the other wall. But yet we're going to say it's kosher. Why? Because since that space is less than 3 tvachim, we look at it as if it extended, as if the wall went that space. And if a sukkah needs a spacing, the interior, the sukkah has to be 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, we look at that as if, look, the inside is still 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim of this sukkah, and we look at it as if it's closed with a wall. That is what Rav Ami comes to tell us. Omar Rav Ami. Rav Ami says, if you have a pas, if you have this board, arba'u mashahu, it's a little more than 4 tvachim, mate b'sukkah mishum dofen, it's considered it's considered a wall to make the sukkah kosher. Now, how could that be? How could that be considered a wall? It's only a little more than 4 tvachim, and we know we need to fill up a space. We need, the area of the sukkah has to be a 7 tefach area. So the answer is mukim la b'pachos mishlosha. And what's the case that it works? It's less than 3 tvachim samach ledofen. It's you placed it like in the picture within 3 tvachim of the next wall. As long as you're within 3 tvachim of the wall, it's as if you're attached to the what? To the wall. So the Gemara asked the obvious question: "My kamash malan." Again, what is the chidush? What are you teaching me? What is the newness? What is the contribution, as my former Rabbi London would say? What's the contribution of the Amorah? What is the rabbi teaching us? Something that we know already, we don't need to teach us. To tell me that you apply the rule of lavud in such a case, why not? Why should it be different than any time you have a space less than 3 tvachim? We say it's as if it's enclosed. So the Gemara answers, he's teaching us what is the size of a sukkah. We had a whole machloket in the Gemara earlier, in the beginning of the Masechta, beginning of the tractate. What's the size of a sukkah? Is the size of a sukkah 4 amot by 4 amot, 7 feet by 7 feet? The different opinions what the size of a sukkah is. This rabbi, by telling us this, is telling us, you know what the size of a sukkah? 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. You only need it 28 inches by 28 inches. My kamash malan, shir meshach sukkah katana. He's teaching us the size of a small sukkah. And that is the size of 7 tvachim shiva. That it's 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. So that's the chidush of this opinion. Okay, now we're on Yud Zayin Amar Aleph, the new Mishnah on 17a. Anybody have any questions on anything we just learned? Spaces in the wall. That's a good question. Would have to be looked into, but we've seen it goes both ways. Now the question is, Max wants to know, what about if simultaneously it's working both ways? It creates spaces this way and it creates spaces this way. That would have to be looked at. I mean, logically, based on what the Gemara is saying, if we don't make a difference between, individually, we don't make a difference. So to say that there is a difference, okay, we'd have to find someone making that difference. Okay, but it's definitely a great question. Okay, now the Mishnah is coming to another practical application of when you're making a sukkah, if you leave certain space, obviously we recommend that you should not leave any space on the top of your sukkah, fill it with schach. But what happened comes the Mishnah on Yud Zayin of 17a. If you went ahead and the schach was a distance from the wall, shloshat tvachim. The schach was a distance from the wall 3 tvachim. If you look at the picture on 17a1, right? You see that picture? If you turn to page 17. Oh, you got it. The first picture, number 1. You see the bamboo on top, but then you see the space between the bamboo and the rest of the ceiling of the right. It did not cover. It left that space. Mr. Haber, you see that space that was left in the picture? So now, since you left a significant an airspace. Here we're talking about airspace. You didn't fill it up. Then we say the Mishnah says psula. In that case, the sukkah is invalid. Now, the only reason why this sukkah is invalid is because you only have 3 walls here in the sukkah. Because you started with 3 walls. You see, there's only 3 walls, right, left, and all the way in the back. There's no. The whole front is open, right? So if you have 3 walls, by the fact that the schach is a distance from that wall on your right facing you of 3 tfachim or more, that creates a disconnect between that wall and the schach. And therefore, it's as if that wall is not there. It doesn't serve you. If that wall doesn't serve you, then you're only left with the 2 walls on the left and the back. And 2 walls doesn't do the trick. You need to have 3 walls for the sukkah. So therefore, that would be the issue with this. Now, if this would have been a 4-wall sukkah, and you would have left that space on that side, so then you would have the other 3 walls. You wouldn't be able. You would have the other. That wall would not be counted part of the sukkah, and you would have the other 3 walls. You would have the other 3 walls to serve as a sukkah, and as long as within the schach that's underneath, that's surrounded by 3 walls, you have a space of 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, an area of 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. Would that remaining sukkah be kosher if you originally started with 4 walls? We'll continue tomorrow. We just started a new Succah, new Mishnah. Have a great day, everybody. Yes. Take care, Mr. Batesh. Have a great day. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.
What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much.